As we dive into our conversation today, I want to start with a poem that made so much sense to me when I was going through my various files today looking at this series. And it's by a woman named Emily Kadar. We live on the wild edge of death and birth. It's up to us to begin again. Your belonging matters more than ever. Every small dream of a thriving world is one note in the new song, one thread in the new story, one cell in this earth body pulsing toward vitality. Your longing is a slow motion prayer. Remember that the world is longing for you to get out of your own holy way. So raise yourself up, hands open and heart first. And so, since we are an international community, it feels important to acknowledge that as an American, I am embarrassed, distressed by how much influence we have on the larger world body. And I wish we didn't have such an overwhelming, dominant power. And at the same time, there is that sense of responsibility that we have, all of us, to do what we can to contribute to the larger world body. And for me, of course, Earth matters. We are matter, the Earth matters. And how can we really take active participation in being a planetary member, part of this Earth body? And for me, part of what makes somatic movement education and therapy such an important discipline in this day and age is that we are reclaiming our humanity as human creatures. In a very kind of strange way, it is our humanity embodied and enacted here and now, and how we relate to the larger body of the planet that is important as a way to push against the technocratic state and the desecration of the planet in this alternate reality. It's always been interesting to me that when people say, oh, you live out in the country, you don't live in the real world. And I find that very odd because, of course, living in nature, living with the natural world is reality. It's this other reality we've created that has displaced us from our origin. So today I'm very happy to welcome Jody Bolluyt, who used to be my next door neighbor in Kinderhook, New York. And when I moved there originally in September um, 2021, I realized that, oh, we have this organic farm next door. I don't need to grow my own vegetables because that's being taken care of. So I can do other things with my land, like build animal habitat, grow pollinators, rewild our forest as a way to take that little piece of land and steward it the best way I could. But what was really inspiring to me about Jody's CSA is that it had a lot of interesting tentacles and relationships. Part of that was providing community with good organic food. Another part was stewarding the land, taking care of the land, and really kind of keeping everything alive. Not only that, the CSA had distribution points not only next door, but in Albany and New York City. And every distribution point was connected to a food bank. So any food that was left over went into the food bank. So it's like, this is brilliant. This is dealing with the earth, the community, the larger community, issues of social inequality. And so for me, it was very exciting. And if you remember the CSA, and I hope any of you who are living in New York City or Albany, sign up and be part of this if you can and if you wish. That every week she would send out a newsletter talking about what's going on the farm. And it really gave me such a deep appreciation for what I consider the profound public service work of farmers, of food is essential. And for those of us who are celebrating and promoting the life of the body, it's important that we are interconnected with these various farmers, organic farmers, stewards of the land around the world who are making a difference. So, with that, Jody, welcome.
Thank you.
And before we kind of dive into anything else in our conversation, anything you want to say in response to, did I miss anything or?
No, I'm very grateful to be here today, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of it.
Yeah, great. So one of the things that for me is always interesting is our origin story. And just if you can kind of guide us through a little bit of your origin story and how you began with this, what I consider a calling, a path.
So I grew up in Iowa, um, and actually my sister and I both farm here together. We took over the farm in 2015, um, and we grew up and our parents didn't farm, but our grandparents had a farm. Our uncles farmed, so we were sort of surrounded by farming. I grew up working on farms. I started working on farms when I was 13.
Mhm.
Um, I think I spent 2 summers of my life not working on a farm. I'm now almost 50. So it's been, it's just that I don't know if it's in the blood or it was just something I love doing, being outside. And there was also lots of agricultural jobs available for young kids in Iowa because that's what we did. Um, in college, I worked on a flower farm, and previous to that, I'd worked on like my uncle's soybean and corn farm, and other corn like, farms, which wasn't really a scale that I liked. I also was concerned about the chemicals used in farming and what I'd seen like agribusiness agriculture do to to the land in our state, to the people, to our water. So it was a small flower farm in my hometown, and I fell in love with farming at that scale. And then in college, I had friends who were doing a farm internship at a farm in Illinois who 10 years later I happened to be meet and we became friends. So it was kind of a
Mm.
funny connection that way. And I was like, oh, that's a thing you can do. Like you can just go work on a small vegetable farm. And so I sort of picked New York randomly, and found a farm. As soon as I graduated from college, I moved to New York and started farming, and I stayed. I was not my plan, but it's became my plan. So I've been here since 1999. My sister moved to Vermont after she graduated from college. Then she and her husband moved to our farm in 2012, and then we've been farming together since then.
Mm.
And our parents moved here in 2004. So we also they work on the farm part-time also. So it has become a family farm.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
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 And it's interesting because I remember something from our earlier conversation, because you're talking about kind of big agriculture in
Hmm.
Iowa and this kind of this sense of, oh, I can scale down and have
Hmm.
something a little more intimate perhaps with the land.
Hmm.
You had mentioned something about pregnant women in Iowa now.
Yeah, it can't drink the water. It's too full of nitrates. So it interrupts the oxygen in the blood in babies. So you pregnant women can't drink the water. And also, I would say it personally in my own family, my three uncles that farmed all have had cancer. My cousin who grew up on the farm has cancer. I also had cancer, so I feel like, and Iowa has one of the highest cancer rates in the United States. So
Mm, mm,
um, yeah, I think it, and all of my uncles will say, yeah, it's because of the chemicals that we were taught to use.
right.
Because
Which is,
yeah, because
well, I was
all
going to
my
say, Yeah.
are all old enough to have remembered the switch from, going from everyone was organic because that's all there was to conventional agriculture. And I can understand the attraction. Like if you've had to work so hard and then all of a sudden you can apply these chemicals and your life is like, oh, so much easier. I can understand the attraction and being sold a bill that then you later realize in life was not probably the best option that you made for yourself.
Right. So the collateral damage of the use of pesticides, and it's interesting because when I think of, chemical waste dumps, I think of places like Louisiana and other places, but we never hear about Iowa, right?
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
breadbasket of the nation being, in a sense, a chemical waste dump. I mean, just the
Hmm.
fact that pregnant women are basically told you should drink bottled water and not your own tap water is of course alarming and yeah, so there's a large scale, like you say, that better living through chemistry, our lives are easier, and yet this is also happening. And in the move to scale down to, in a way, something more manageable, more intimate, you could talk a little bit about your experience of kind of being in one place for a while, stewarding this land, your relationships with, your customers, just give us a
Hmm.
picture of how that is to work at a smaller scale.
Um, well, I mean, our farm is a smaller farm. We grow 25 acres of veggies, but we have 375 acres of land total that we get to steward. We also raise grass-fed beef, so we have a lot of pasture and hay fields. Um, yeah, I feel like this land is part of my family. Like we know every corner of it and every season, and um, just getting to like walk out your door and everything you see is part of your daily life is pretty amazing. And I feel like it's a real gift, and I'm very grateful. Um, and I'm also grateful that all of that land is protected. All of either it's owned by a nonprofit and we have a lease on it, or it is leased on short term, but all of the land the development rights have been protected or been purchased by another land trust so that the land can never be developed. It can only be a farm. So I
Hmm.
know that, you know, our tenure here is not that long, but it will continue to be a farm beyond my sister and I.
Right. Well, that must be, I imagine, just reassuring in that
Mhm.
this is staked out. We know this will be preserved.
Yeah.
And I understand that sense of even just the 3 years I was living on that piece of land next door, my sense of the woods and working in the woods and just noticing the trees and pausing. And yeah, that's kind of landing in place just feels so essential,
Mhm.
especially when there's so much going on. Uh, we're moving at the speed of light, and meanwhile, there's this land that holds us.
Mhm.
It's just there. And yeah. Hmm. So tell us a little bit about your land.
Um, we're really like, I grew up in the Midwest where everything is flat and a square. Um,
Hmm. Right.
And so it was at first an adjustment to be like, oh, it's hilly and diverse here. Like we have a lot of woodlands and then the creek on the farm. We have wetlands. We have like hilly grasslands that we use for grazing. And then we have really beautiful flatland that we use for the vegetables. So we kind of have looked at all the different pieces of land and what's appropriate to do with it. When we first moved here in 99, it was a potato farm and it had been for, I don't know, 50, 60 years before that. So every acre had been plowed up and planted in potatoes or other, sometimes pumpkin, sometimes field corn. So it looks very different now than it did. Like when we first walked the fields, it was all potatoes or corn
Hmm.
from the road to the creek. Um,
Wow.
and now it doesn't look like that. There's like maybe 50 acres of vegetable land on the 375 acres. The rest of it's in grass. or woodlands or wetlands.
Mhm.
So it looks very different now.
And in the diversification of, how you use the land, just says something about diversification and the different crops and just how you work with that.
Yeah, so we grow because we're a CSA farm, so we want to have like, 8 to 15 different crops every week for our customers. So we grow a very wide variety of veggies every week, which I think is sort of its own form of insurance because a lot of like commodity farms can get crop insurance, but it doesn't really work for our kind of farm.
Hmm.
They don't know what to do with somebody who grows 27 different things. But so growing like a wide variety is sort of our own insurance because if we have something's going to do well if something else doesn't. So we always know we'll have something available even if the weather isn't cooperating with us. And also just looking at the land and seeing when we first moved here, how especially because we're along the creek, which can flood quite violently in the spring and the fall, like the ruts that were in the fields and the fact there weren't any earthworms, um, like there weren't butterflies, there weren't birds around because it
Hmm.
had been farmed so chemically, and also there wasn't like any like natural corridors to connect the woods from one side of the farm to the other. So there weren't the birds and like butterflies and things. And now they're everywhere because we have sort of brought back like shrubs and the grasslands and things like that. So yeah, we've returned some life back to the farm that had been missing for a while.
Hmm. Hmm. And
Um,
I'd never heard of crop insurance before. I didn't know there was such a thing.
yeah, like it's like the apple farms around here, they'll have crop insurance. So if they have a crop failure, they because they've invested so much money. If they would have one crop failure, that would be the end.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
yeah. So and like farms that grow just like one thing, it's pretty easy to get crop insurance for because they
Mhm.
know the value, but nobody knows what the value of our tomatoes versus our broccoli is.
Right.
So,
And I imagine just from my own experience that there needs to be kind of a rotation that you can only plant certain things in the same place
mhm.
and that you need to kind of keep that moving around and yeah.
Yeah, so every year the farm looks completely different because we try to keep 3 years in between like planting the same family of vegetable in that same field. So it's constantly moving around, and all of our fields are different sizes. So it's kind of like a little math puzzle every winter to figure out how things are going to fit.
Hmm. And this in this kind of crop rotation and other, what would you say kind of are some of the fundamentals of farming organically?
Um, so like moving things around because you want to interrupt your pest pattern, your because sometimes some of them will live in the soil over the winter or they'll live in like the field borders. So you want to move those crops away from those pests and they don't live as long if they don't have the food they like to eat. So they're not likely to um, live if they don't have that food. Um, we also want to like sometimes there's some plants that have soil diseases that are carried in the soil. Like we can't really grow potatoes on our farm because of all the potatoes that were grown for 50 to 60 years and the diseases are just in the soil.
Mm,
And one way to keep those diseases from showing up is to keep the pH of your soil super low, but then none of the other vegetables like that. So we've had to raise the pH, so that means we can't really grow potatoes. Um, and I don't know that anyone ever will, like unless they're growing them chemically and like lowering the pH, like we can't. There's
mm,
like two varieties that we can sort of grow successfully.
mm,
Um, we're also looking at like climate change is a huge factor. The weather patterns are erratic, like we don't really have normal weather anymore. It's either flooding and raining and never stopping, or it doesn't rain at all. Um, Sort
mm.
of seems like there's never just when I first started farming, like we'd get like, an inch of rain every week and it was kind of reliable that way. Now you're like, wonder which it's gonna be a wet or a dry year. Um, or there's just like new insects that we haven't seen before, or new diseases that come in and wipe out a crop, and everyone scrambles to figure out what to do. And like, maybe 5 years ago, this new basil disease came, and like within a week, everyone around here, we walked out, our basil was just dead. There was nothing left.
Mm,
And nobody'd seen it before. And everyone's like, whoa, what is that? And we work a lot with the cooperative extensions from Cornell University, University of Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, and Vermont, who are really responsive to farmers' needs. And so they kind of figured out that it was a downy mildew that came from big box stores buying plants from Florida.
mm.
And it didn't used to be able to like recreate itself, but now it can because our winters are warm and our weather's just weird. So it survives here now. So within 5 years, we now have the seed companies that we work with have produced new varieties that are resistant to that disease, uh, which is a pretty quick turnaround, I thought.
Sure, sure.
Um, so we're lucky that we have people responding to the like because otherwise we couldn't grow basil in the Northeast, um, which would be a real bummer. Oh, we also have lots of new pests that we have to figure out how to deal with. And like you don't really know they're here till it's too late, and so then you have to figure out the next season how do we deal with this now? And then fortunately, our cooperative extensions have helped us figure out how to deal with them or figure out that we can't really deal with them, and so there's crops we don't grow anymore.
So it sounds like over the years you've mastered a lot of flexibility in your
Yeah.
response to these changing conditions and kind of what I'd call the overwhelming nature to a certain degree of
Yeah.
these changes. I almost imagine, I don't know, are they speeding up? Are these changes in kind of pests, diseases, extreme weather? Are you seeing kind of, from your perspective, are they speeding up? Are they intensifying?
Yeah, I think they're intensifying for sure, especially because at least this winter's been colder, but we haven't had cold winters. So like even cover crops that have consistently, like cover crops we plant them to keep the soil protected over the summer or the winter. They're things that we grow just for the soil. They're not a food crop. Cover crops that we've always planted have not, and that have reliably always been frost killed, have been living.
Hmm.
Um, and last year was like everyone was like, oh, all of our oats, which normally are very frost sensitive, and everybody's oats survived, which is not a thing that any of us had ever experienced before. So
Hmm.
I imagine this winter will be different because it's actually cold. But
It's been pretty cold. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, just like that, like farmers who've been farming, they're in their 80s. They're like, whoa, that's it. Just felt really strange that our fields were green in the
Hmm.
spring when they never are. So yeah, those kind of changes are always a little surprising.
Hmm. And so that's kind of keeping abreast of all that. It's like, where do you get your kind of your support tentacles? What's the kind of the ecosystem of support that really kind of keeps you moving with all this because there's so much happening.
Yeah. But well, we have the cooperative extension agencies that send out weekly newsletters, or they send out like you can like sign up for emails or texts when there's like the bugs are coming, and they'll tell you when they're coming, so you can be prepared. Or if there's there's the blight in the tomatoes that will destroy your tomatoes overnight, just sort of thing. Oh, it's been in this county. Watch out. Like, do what you can to protect yourself. You also like just there's so many of us farming in Columbia County now. Um, just having our farming friends that we run into places or if
Hmm.
you like
Hmm.
yeah although we don't like to go to tractor supply anymore maybe like our agway where we go now and you're like hey how are you doing and they're like oh yeah yeah yeah
So that,
nothing
so that in-person sharing
yeah
of information, kind of, I mean, old style,
yeah
is still present in the community.
hmm
Yeah, it's great.
and then the winter there's farm conferences or farm meetings that we like to go to mostly for like we there's always still like learn things but mostly it's just to see people and
Mhm.
connect that way.
Hmm. So, if you were to kind of think at this moment in time, all the effort that goes into organic farming as opposed to conventional farming,
Mhm. would
would you change to conventional farming?
No. No. I mean, I've seen what it's done to like my own health, and the health of my family members who all grew, farmed chemicals most of their lives. And also, um, I don't really want to like support the work that I guess they're Bayer now, but Monsanto and like supporting those companies is not really where I want my dollars to go to. I don't agree with what they've done in the world. So
Mhm. Mhm.
also it's like knowing that uh, my the people who work on the farm or people visiting the farm aren't in danger because of the chemicals I'm using or like the food that I'm sending out to people um, is not dangerous. It
Mhm.
doesn't have chemical residue on it.
Right, right. So you're staying the
Yes,
course.
yes,
This is yeah, which is
yeah.
admirable because kind of as we cycle through these different changes, sometimes people are like, well, this isn't cost effective, or this is
Mhm.
too much work. I'm going to fudge a little bit over here, but
Yeah.
no fudging.
No fudging. No.
Thank you for not fudging. Yeah. So kind of because I know that part of what's important to you is trust,
Mm,
and that your customers trust you, and basically I imagine you trust them, and
mhm.
there's a big value on that trust. And so could you just kind of explain a little bit for you what that is with the CSA, and why a CSA as opposed to another model of farming?
So when I first started farming here, it was a CSA farm, and I really liked that idea that we know who we're feeding, we know where our food is going. We're growing whatever we're growing. We know it has a place to go to. So there is that like assurance that I'm not growing something that I won't be able to sell. So there's like that economic connection where we know that what we're growing has a place to go, and we're being paid for what we're growing. Um, but and I also just liked like the personal connection that like when people come to the farm to get their vegetables or I get to do a delivery, like people are always super excited to see a truck full of veggies pull up. And
Hmm.
that's yeah, even like I remember the first time I had to do like a rescue mission because our old truck broke down. And so we were like hours late with like dropping off the vegetables and everyone was still we're like, oh, thank you for coming. Like thanks
Mhm.
for making the effort instead of being like, why are you late?
Right, right.
Which I was like, oh, this is like it just like it's already hard enough day. Like our truck broke down, we're scrambling, but just to know that like people were just really pleased and excited that we still showed up just felt really nice. And knowing that, there's some people who like I see every winter for 30 years they've been a member of our farm. Like I may have never met them, but I recognize their name and like I know their emails and yeah, that's a really amazing connection to have. I don't know a lot of businesses who get to have like that lifelong connection or like we've had like college kids come and ask if they can come visit and they're actually like members kids who have eaten our food their whole lives, which
Hmm.
is also really
Wow.
cool. Yeah. And also like I know like because I raised my stepkids on the farm and like some of their friends were members, so just seeing them grow up eating our food and yeah, just
Mhm.
really nice to know that.
So in terms of your business model, there is an aspect of just deep intimacy and connection with customers, with the land, with this kind of what I call a holistic ecosystem
Hmm.
that is focused around, of course, one of our most essentials, food. And
Hmm.
yeah, so it's very impressive, and of course it's something it's easy to take for granted. And of course, we have Whole Foods, and they have organic vegetables and stuff.
Hmm.
And yet I know for myself there is something about buying directly from the farm, the freshness, the lack of distribution, the fossil fuels that go into it, that all of that this idea of eating locally is not only just important for the farms and for our health, but also that the land where we live is impacting us at a cellular level. And of course, it makes sense that whatever food is grown in that terroir is kind of essential nutrition and has a different, if you want to call it, a different vibration, a different quality of aliveness.
Mm. Yeah, I think also like we're really lucky that we have a really long-term team of people who've worked with us, who are super knowledgeable and very skilled and very caring about the land and each other and the product that we're putting out. So I like having them is amazing. Like I know a lot of farms aren't lucky enough to have that kind of long-term team, which I think definitely is a big reason why our produce is such a high quality.
Mhm, mhm. And speaking of the team and the workers, I know that you have some kind of registry with um, a certification about paying your workers equitably. Could you talk about that? Because that was new
Sure.
for me to hear about that.
It's called the Agricultural Justice Project, and like in the past, there have like if you buy your equal exchange coffee, it has like that the farmers where you're buying it from are giving a fair price and treated fairly. So but there isn't really a domestic label for having a farm that treats the employees fairly and equitably. So that's what this organization was trying to do. It's been really hard. I don't,
Mhm,
they are not doing it this year. So they don't have the funding.
mhm,
It's also been, I think, trying to fight like the large agribusiness industry um, is difficult. And farming does not have the best history in the United States of treating employees well. It's pretty awful, actually. So it's had a hard time getting traction, I think.
mhm.
And maybe because I think there's only 5 farms that are certified.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty small. So I think, and they've got a hard time really growing the label so that it means something so that farmers want to pay for it because it's expensive. So that kind of
Right.
thing is, yeah. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it's important. And then, I mean, it doesn't really like farming, we're still like employees don't expect to have like a 401k. Like they don't expect to have retirement because farmers don't really have that. So it's sort of a weird industry that um, has never really professionalized itself to be one that provides like a wage where people can go and afford to buy a house in Kinderhook, like
Mhm.
that,
Yeah, right.
um, or that they can expect to have retirement when they're done. It's not what the agricultural industry has done, and
Hmm.
it should. I don't know how to get there, but it's something that we should do. And also, I don't know another industry in the United States that allows over 40% of its workers to not have legal documentation in the country, so they don't have legal protections to be here. We want their labor, but we don't want their humanity kind of thing. I don't know any other industry who's done that. So I
Mhm.
think agriculture in general has failed in that way, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't realize the certification was so few farms. And
Yeah,
yeah,
unfortunately.
and at the same time, as we all know, especially Ismeta as a grassroots organization, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
And it's having the vision and the dedication of day to day, like just walking the walk.
yeah. So I think
And
they're trying to like take a year to like revamp and figure out how to make it something bigger
mhm,
that can reach more people. But yeah, it has to start. I mean, there's one big berry farm in California that is certified, which I think is a big change, especially in the berry industry in California. So
mhm.
I think that was a great thing that they were able to accomplish that.
And because as humans we're kind of herd animals,
Mhm.
it's through action that things happen. There's a study that was talking about how, in terms of solar panels, that you could talk to people about this, that, the other thing, didn't make much difference. But once people in your neighborhood started putting up solar panels, little by little, that would catch on. So
Hmm.
that normalization of change, and it's just got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, the berry farm in California has they are there now, and who knows what will ripple out from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we kind of move into just kind of dialogue with people who've shown up today, um, anything that you would like to just bring forward as kind of action steps that people can take, even just very simple action steps that support this idea of quality food for human beings while you know taking care of land, honoring land, and all the creatures that are part of land.
I think right now, I guess I just calling our Congress people every day, to tell them we like there's a lot of funding available for climate change practice, like farming in a way that can mitigate climate change. And it was a lot of money. Like our farm was supposed to get 40,000 just for our little farm. Um, and that was Trump cut that funding. So it's like, and a lot of farms were in the middle of funding $1 million projects.
Hmm.
Like it's for planting, like windbreaks. It's for planting cover crops, for having buffers in between like creeks and your farm fields. It was like all these practices that could, oh, sorry, mitigate climate change, and that's all been cut. So we're trying to get it back.
Hmm.
There's also they're maybe cutting SNAP. Sorry, let me get my dog. I apologize.
Oh.
Barking. Um, Cutting SNAP funding, which a lot of farmers use. Our farm can accept SNAP payments, um, so that we can um, allow access to more people in our community can have access to our kind of food.
Do you want to say, because not everybody here is from the
Um,
United States, if you could say what
oh,
SNAP?
SNAP. SNAP is supplemental nutrition. So it's to make food more affordable for people who are low income. You can use it at like grocery stores, farmers markets. Now a lot of farmers are now able to accept them. It's through the federal government. It also funds a lot of um, lunches and meals at schools, which I know so like in California, where my stepdaughter farms, they supply a ton of apples to local schools. So it's a way for farmers to get funding and then make food available to people who don't normally have access. So calling our Congress people and saying, please don't take that funding too.
Right.
Also asking for like fair immigration practices, that we aren't deporting the people who know how to feed us is really important. I think just, yeah, supporting your local farmers wherever you can.
Mhm.
Farmers markets, like go to restaurants that buy from local farmers. CSA, I think however accessing local produce works for you, I think is super important.
Yeah, there is that kind of unfortunate, I mean, because we've all been kind of raised in this culture to get the best deal and the cheapest
Yeah,
deal, and you know,
yeah,
I've lived overseas, and I mean, I know from living overseas, it's like food in the United States is pretty cheap to begin with, and
yeah.
of course, there's a cost to that, and so we're used to this idea, so to pay more for organic,
Mhm.
a lot of people just kind of dig in their heels. And what would you say to those folks?
Um, well, I think lots of time if you're buying directly from the farmer, like it's not that much more expensive. I think it's unfortunately when you get involved with Whole Foods or the big grocery store chains, there's so much money going to the people in between, not to the
Mm,
farmers.
mhm.
Like the farmer isn't getting more money um,
Right. Oh,
than
mhm.
yeah. Like or even like locally, like we partner with friends of ours who have an egg farm. Um, and I happen to know I was delivering their eggs to a local like on farm store for another. I know that they were charging that farm store $5 a dozen, and I went into the store and they were charging $10 a dozen for that. So I mean, I know you need to mark things up. I know they have costs, but I
Right.
was just like,
Yeah.
like if you went to our friend's farm, they have like a little like farm store, farm stand on their farm. They're selling them for $5 a dozen. But because we drove them an hour and put them in a fancy store, they're $10 a dozen. So
Go figure.
yeah.
No, no.
So yeah, I think like getting direct as like close to the source as you can. I think we're not that much more expensive if you're
Right.
closer to the source. And also like cheap food has a cost. Like I mean, look at you know, Iowa or you're down to Louisiana along the Mississippi, like we've kind of destroyed that river and we've destroyed the Gulf of Mexico where the water runs out. Like, so there is a hidden cost that
Right.
we just don't realize when we buy our corn syrup food.
Right. And I think that is one of the problems is not seeing the interconnection and the bigger picture at work. And I'd say as movement educators and therapists, that we are really looking at all of the interconnecting links. It's not just enough to do a breath practice or some kind of movement, but it's also what is the meaning of movement? What does it mean to you? How do you settle in yourself? How do you work with life challenges, but understanding your body as a holistic resource as opposed to just, this thing, this thing that we keep in shape and carry around,
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah. Hmm. So I could go on and on in conversation with you, but I want to invite in people who are here who would like just any response you'd like to bring forward in relationship to our conversation or any specific questions or yeah, so please, um, how do we want to do this? Do we want to do the use the hand emoji or just go ahead? We're a small group, so I think we could just go ahead and people can uh, just unmute and chime in if you wish.
Hi,
Hi.
I can go first since yeah, Tina also unmuted now. Thank you so much, both of you. It's so interesting to listen to your experience, Jody, and I'm so impressed with the choice that you have made, lifelong choice to like make this your own way, like to farm your own way, which is not the mainstream way. So I just want to say thank you for starters. And that really resonates with my way of choosing to live and eat and grow. I don't have a farm, I just have a garden. But it's just to do this at a larger scale is just very impressive. And I'm joining from Sweden. So I just have a couple of comments or questions. One was, how do you approach seeds? Like, how do you harvest seeds or trade seeds or store seeds, for the next,
So unfortunately, we do not save seed. Sometimes we'll save like we save our garlic seed, like our garlic seed, or we'll save some flower seeds or some peppers. But for the most part, we purchase our seeds from some smaller seed companies that serve organic farmers. It's not yeah, it's a little because we also grow a lot of hybrids because of all of the problems with diseases and insects we have and that we want to produce a lot of food because we have 930 members that we're serving every week that we've gone with hybrids so you can't save the seed. Um,
Yeah,
so unfortunately, all of that technology is owned by another company.
right.
Um, but the seed companies we purchase from do not purchase their seeds or their varieties from like Syngenta, which is a Monsanto
Yeah,
Bayer company. So they try to source their seeds from smaller seed companies that are more responsible and kinder to people and the environment.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I find it very interesting. And I was like, shall I stock up on seeds? But I know they only last so long.
Right.
It's like we have seed banks in Scandinavia and things like that. But it's always like, sometimes these seed banks, they go up in flames for
Mm.
whatever reason, right? So I just think like this thing with seeds is really, really important. And my other question was, maybe we go to Tina first. We'll rotate a little bit. Thank you for this.
Oh, thank you, Maya, for starting us off. And thank you so much, Jamie, for your conversations, your profound commitment to this. Huge appreciation in our community. Yeah, yeah. And Jody, what a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you for your commitment, your wisdom, your way of looking at the whole system, the plants themselves, the life of the land, your family, the community, your workers. I want to say I'm so sorry about the cancer
Oh, thank
that you went through and your family. I really am, and it's a profound example of how interconnected we are with the land.
you.
I wanted to just say that, and I'm thrilled about your health. I hope you're feeling strong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, good, good. And I really appreciated your question, Jamie, about recommendations you might have for us, Jody, because I've been calling Congress a lot about various things. And AOC, I watched a little video that she put out the other day, and she was saying, I'm just going to be a little partisan just for a few moments, that a lot of GOP folks are calling constantly, constantly. And she said, well, are Democrats introverts or like, what's up? Because she said it really makes a difference because they don't want to disappoint their constituents and they want to be reelected. So for people who feel what's the use, it's of great use. So I appreciated you giving us some specifics that we can talk to them about for sourcing what you're doing, which is at the heart of so much. Um, so I wanted to ask two questions, a little more about your teamwork, how you work together, and you were talking about the people who work with you and for you and the elders who are advising, kind of, I had that sense of things. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious. And then this might seem, a little off topic or not, but I spent some time at the Findhorn Foundation because I was involved with people in the community there in Scotland where they did enormous organic farming, with very troubled land that they really built up. And they had group decision-making meetings where they would attune several times a day quietly and come to decisions together. I know that's a very specific way of working, and it's not always possible, particularly with larger groups. But the way that community started, as I understood it from them, had to do with a husband and wife who were very committed to farming unfarmable land, finding out how to do that. And one of their later colleagues who joined them, who was in direct connection with the divas of the plant nation. And so she did a lot of communication with plants that, the sweet peas said, please don't plant me next to this one because they eat all the water and they take all the resources. Please put me over there. And so they listened to that and things really flourished. So I know that's a very specific kind of question, but the holistic ecosystem, as you've been talking about, is so profoundly spiritual as well as physical and everything else that I just wanted to inquire about that. So
Um,
whatever you may want to share.
sure. So, well, I think it's like 'cause my sister and I, so we are, I guess, the owners and like the
Yeah.
main managers. So that's pretty easy because we're very similar and um, it's I don't know. We don't even have to like speak to under no at this point. Um, but then we have a really I think our crews kind of like people come and they're like, huh, how does this work? Because we have there's 6 women who live locally with their families, but they lived here 20, 25 years, but they're originally from Mexico. And then we have a young guy who's grown up in Columbia County. He's never really left the county. Like he grew up working on conventional dairy and beef farms. Um, and then we usually have like 2 or 3 other people who come for maybe 2 to 5 years. They're more like they're learning about agriculture. They often go off and start their own farms or become managers on other farms. So they're kind of here more short term. But somehow I think like we've come to see that we're more alike than we are different. Um, and that we know each other's families. Like we there's just I think a deep respect for each other, even though we may have very different life experiences and different opinions on things. And I find that they all feel really connected to the land. And like they all like everyone notices different things and everyone bringing what they notice to like our farm meetings or just to like the discussions when we're working and like and trying to make space for other people to bring their ideas and what they see because we can't do this alone. Like the more eyes and seeing and sensing that are going on out there, that we're all it makes everything better. So yeah, we really want to know what other people are experiencing and seeing and their ideas and their creativity. Like I feel like because there's been so many people who have come to this farm, either as like members or who have worked here, like it would not be the same place without them. Like it's been built by so many hands. Um, and I just get to be lucky to keep being here and experiencing all
And you're already saying it in so many ways. If you want to say anything about the so-called spiritual aspect, which of course is not separate, and your sense of the plants and their communication with you and with among themselves and the larger system, I don't know.
that. I mean, I definitely feel like a deep connection to all the plants and the animals and the land. Um, and I think everybody who works here does, but in their own way. I'm not, some of them are quite religious in their
Yeah,
upbringing. They're very Catholic, and so they have, but I think I still, but they're also, um, I think they feel a deep connection to their culture and um, through the land that way. I think a lot of all of the people that work here now have grown up farming in different ways, so it's been a part of their life their whole lives. So I think they're definitely very connected in their own ways. I don't know that we really discuss the spiritual aspect of it, because I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But I think we just sort of honor the way
yeah,
everyone experiences it and makes sort of space for that.
yeah.
And we've had employees who are like a lot who are from biodynamic agriculture. I don't know if you've from
Mhm.
Rudolf Steiner who are definitely more like that's definitely part of their farming practice and it's something they share with us, which I think is really cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Oops, I have a patient, so I have to go. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
to both of you and to everyone. Bye-bye.
I just want to make a comment in terms of the trickle down effect or the reverberation. Where we're living now is a co-housing community in the Massachusetts Hills, and we have in our yard an incredible late fruiting peach tree. They're ripe in October, which is very unusual. And this year we had like a bumper crop, and so we were harvesting a lot to make, our jams and things. And then we have 9 other families that live here. So we just said, okay, come and get it. And people came, and there were still so many peaches that then I realized, oh, you're right. Down in Greenfield, the town down the hill, there is a organization called Stone Soup that makes a free community meal each week. And so I called them up and said, "Hey, would you like a couple of bushes of peaches?" They were like, "Great, bring them on down." So the idea of the food bank related to your CSA inspired me to even think of that. I wouldn't have thought about that before, but just that making that direct connection was so exciting. And now this year, somebody else in the community said, "Hey, high five to Jamie for thinking of that this year. Let's get a little more connected to our community. And as we grow things, how we can keep supporting Stone Soup throughout the summer." So once again, it's the ripple effect for me, which is so important and why I find these conversations, even though I know for you this is second nature, this is what you do, but it's the that impact and how we can connect to other communities and continue to build the soil of our social ecosystem again, because that has also been degraded in recent years, particularly by the pernicious effects of social media and what that's yeah, how that has really weakened the social contract. And so I just want to acknowledge your inspiration and for that my in terms of my own learning curve. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Good evening. Jamie, I just wanted to also extend your thought about community because I'm joining you from overseas. I'm based in Scotland. Yeah, so it's just wonderful to listen to this conversation because, of course, we are primarily joining you as movers and somatic practitioners, but I feel like, just like you said, the matter and the issue of food is kind of preceding whatever other professions we are busy with in life. And it's such a food for thought as well. So it's both, metaphorical, abstract, and primarily basic to human life and to human health. So thank you for reminding us about that. What I was thinking about also, joining the circle of people who do care, is just that level of relevance of what we can do in daily life and how incapable also we feel. At least I know I do. And I'll maybe sketch tiny bit why. I grew up in southeast Poland where, access to wildly grown and just appearing on your footpath apple trees were common bread. I would just run into the forest and collect berries and anything I could find as a kid. And then I do remember when I first came both to Poland or UK stores, and I was finding a handful of berries packed in all that loaded plastic for gazillions of money. I was so offended. I couldn't find a feeling for that. So that sort of humankind or being part of humankind that cheats on itself kind of comes very often to mind. Another thing, living in Scotland for the last over 7 years or so, I also came across another thing, which is just connection to the wild land, which is also exceptional for me. Even seeing things like fallen trees that are not being taken care of. So it's just like, Jamie, what you were saying, how do we navigate that human action, which is beautiful in the way that we want to keep things wild. And for example, in Scotland, it's for me, when I first saw a fallen tree, which I knew could have been saved just by raising it, because it falls with it, with the whole, ground just hugged onto the roots. So it could have been just lifted back and brought back to life. It's being left as is, right? And that's like an acknowledged and accepted standard here, which also kind of, from where we come from and what we are used to, has been bringing different sense of me being unable to act or help or do anything about it. And I'm thinking in terms of farming, you go, it is a long path of, our relationship to wild land. Then, just like Maya was mentioning, us doing something for ourselves at the back of our gardens, and then, of course, going into way more organized farming. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wouldn't even know where to start in my garden because, within the school education, of course, all that political propaganda that is behind it, especially for you from the American perspective, this is not really an everyday knowledge for a general person. You either have to choose it as a profession, I'm going into ecology, I'm going into farming, I'm going into agriculture, whatever. Yeah, so you learn. But just coming back to my first thought, this is such a basic necessity for us to know, to not only to know in terms of, conceptual knowledge, but how to connect to it as well, how to have those basic skills of growing things. So of course, if you have family who has been in farming for long, that's natural. But I think it could be much wider than that. And we could have a better access, as people caring for the land, to actually just being educated on that a little bit more throughout. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Jody.
Um, yeah, I was lucky that I grew up around it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. But I know that here there's lots of like community gardening programs where like you can get like a little plot of land in town and there's like education programs for kids to
I
teach
love.
them, which I think is super important. And I think there's more of that happening than there has been in the past. So that's really encouraging to see.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say especially in urban settings, that's even more important since that can seem like there's a big separation between quote unquote nature and life. I know that a lot of kind of school gardens in California, I imagine they're also here. But yeah, starting with the basics, returning to the basics and valuing the impact of that knowledge and not allowing it to be a lost art. It's an incredibly important art. How do we grow food? How do we grow plants? How do we create ecosystems that support life? Hmm. So before we wrap this up, Jody, any final thoughts?
No, I thank everybody for inviting me to be here. It's been a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. It's been delicious to have you here. I appreciate your presence and everything you're doing. And as you can see in the chat, there's links to Roxbury Farm, there's CSA. You can learn more about the farm. You also have the Glenwood Center, which is helping farmers become more climate friendly, climate resilient. And in my latest newsletter, there's a lot of links of different people writing as what I consider as part of the resistance from different points of view. One is a scholar, Kristen Dumez, who's actually an evangelical Christian who teaches at a Christian college, who wrote a book called Jesus and John Wayne. And she's really focused in on the encroachment of Christian nationalism on our politics here. along with Heather Cox Richardson, who's a historian who is brilliant, kind of writes a post every day to put things in a historical perspective of what's happening. And so there's links to different writers there, because for me, one of the things that's important is that all of us use our platforms, whatever platforms we have, with newsletters, websites, whatever, to continue to disseminate information that can really help with, as the Buddhists refer to, the turning of the wheel. And the turning of the wheel right now is really dependent upon all of us to step up and contribute whatever it is we have, because all these little raindrops make a river. So I want to thank Jody for joining me here today, and thank you all for showing up. And yeah, so this will be on YouTube. So another way that we're spreading this out into the world. So thank you all very much for showing up. Elizabeth, anything you want to say in closing?
Thank you, Jamie, again for your generosity in hosting these sessions month after month and now year after year, your commitment to sharing resources and offering inspiring information that people can take. I see you as a seed planter yourself. And we never know how or when or where the seeds that you offer will begin to take root and blossom in their own ways. So many thanks to you for this service to our community. And Jody for being a special guest today. Many thanks. If anyone would like to sign up for the Ismeta newsletter to hear about upcoming podcasts that Jamie will continue doing, I put that link in the chat.
I'm
And
glad you mentioned that. Just to mention that my guest next month is Jason Davis, who started the Climate Stories Project, which is really people sharing their personal experience of climate change, and to begin to create that conversation and that, first person centered experience of climate change, which I think is really important. All these different voices. So he'll be my guest on March 20th on the spring equinox. At a different time, at later in the daytime, because people in Australia have asked to be included in the conversation. So that conversation will start at 6 p.m. Eastern time instead of 1 p.m. Eastern. So thank you. Yes, Climate Stories Project. It's on Lisa. It's on the Ismeta website. I don't have it handy right here. Yeah.
I'll enter it into the chat after we end.
Oh, okay. That Elizabeth, she's got everything going. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
As we
Thank you.
continue on. Bye bye.